For my friends who are just now hopping on, as you are getting your audio set up and then your video turned on as you are able, we are just sharing in the chat in honor of Women's History Month. Who's your favorite woman theologian or author? I'd also love to know where everyone is hopping in from. So if you want to share where you're logging in from, feel free, and we'll get started in about a minute here. I know Josh and myself are logging on from Atlanta, Georgia. Well, I don't know. Oh, Covington, yep. Nice. Waco. Oh, Aaron, that's awesome. Aaron shared that this question helped me realize I don't read enough women theologians. Thanks for the challenge. It was actually through a pastor's group that I did with Josh and his team that I started to realize some of my most quotable theologians I had. While I've read a diverse set of folks, the ones that I'm hearing from the pulpit and the ones that I could just pull from my brain the fastest were usually white men. And they have some great stuff, but I wonder what systems and structures set that up to be that those are the ones I'm hearing repetitively. And so love that processing and feedback, Aaron. Thank you for sharing. We've got some Houston, Cincinnati, Tulsa. Cool. I love it. Well, hey friends, it is 7 and I'd love to honor everyone's time. We're going to go ahead and get started. Up the mountain and he sat down. His disciples came to him, and he began to speak and taught them, saying,
Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven.
Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted.
Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth.
Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled.
Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy.
Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God.
Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God.
Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven.
Blessed are you when people revile you and persecute you, and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account.
Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven, for in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Undivided Gathering. The Gathering exists as a part of the Undivided Movement for those who are seeking a belonging space rooted in Jesus and justice. My name is Jasmine Sosa, and I get to be your host for this evening. I'm on staff with Undivided supporting the Gathering experience. In my day job, I work for a church network in Atlanta, Georgia. This year, our gathering is going to be focusing kind of upward, inward, and outward, if you're familiar with some of those shapes, the spiritual formation shapes. But our hope within that is to have an intentional, curated space that serves our community, focusing upward in prayer some months, focusing inward on organizational updates and connections, and feeling more rooted within the community here at Undivided, and also outward with some guest speakers to learn from. So tonight we're going to have one of those outward focuses. We are going to have an incredible guest, a friend of mine from Atlanta, Georgia. So that being said, we do love hearing from you. So there will be forms at the end to connect you further to the Undivided Movement and to hear your feedback on some of these nights. But specifically, I want to speak to any of my new folks. If you are new here, I am so glad you are here. Welcome on behalf of the Undivided team. There will be some of those forms at the end, and those are a great way to get you connected further to the Undivided community outside of these 4 Zoom walls. Part of the DNA at Undivided is that we foster intentional and brave spaces by collectively committing to one another on how we will engage and treat one another. So at this time, and each month when we gather, we want to begin by affirming the commitments of this space. So the first is that we commit to the flow of racial healing and justice. This space is specifically for those who are pursuing racial justice in their own lives, churches, and communities. We step into the flow of being present with God's Spirit and with one another in our time together. Our second commitment is that we commit to warmth, respect, and empathy. In this space, we treat one another as the beloved image bearers of a holy and perfect God. This means that we get honest by using I statements over you or they statements. And it means that we give grace and we listen with empathy. Finally, we commit to dream in the dark. For many of us, these can feel like dark days. And at the gathering, we want to fan the flames of hope and joy in full acknowledgement of the challenges you are individually facing. Yet we want to keep the imagination alive and dream in the dark. So if you are in agreement with these commitments, I'd love for you to either use the emoji thumbs up or put in the chat, we will. Thank you all. Love it. I see some of those thumbs. See the chat being activated. Thank you so much. This community is just so blessed by each of you choosing to be present. So each gathering, we're going to begin with a form of worship and reflection. And today we're actually going to get to hear a partial clip of an interview that our founder, Chuck Mingo, during an interview hosted by Grace Midtown Church staff, which is the church that I work for during the week, that we conducted with Troy and Chuck. And we were having a discussion over Black History Month. So to set you up for where we were during the interview, I had just asked both Troy and Chuck to answer, how could we keep from getting discouraged? Or maybe to the listener who's feeling like change is slow, or conversations about race feel difficult, or maybe you just don't even know where to begin. What would you say to that individual right now in this moment in history? And so we're going to get to listen to that video now and just hear a clip of a prayer that Chuck read. And it's something that deeply inspired our community, and I thought maybe the gathering folks would want to hear it too. So let's listen to that now, and feel free to share any reflections or thoughts in the chat.
Yeah, I'd actually love to, in response to that question, Jasmine, read a reflection. This is something that Troy and I encountered. I've heard it before, but we encountered it at a gathering we were at last week. And it's written by a cardinal, a bishop in the Catholic Church. And I just want to read it. It's called Prophets of a Future, Not Our Own. It says, it helps now and then to step back and take a long view. The kingdom is not only beyond our efforts, it is even beyond our vision. We accomplish in our lifetime only a tiny fraction of the magnificent enterprise that is God's work. Nothing we do is complete, which is a way of saying that the kingdom always lies beyond us. No statement says all that could be said. No prayer fully expresses our faith. No confession brings perfection. No pastoral visit brings wholeness. No program accomplishes the church's mission. No set of goals and objectives includes everything. This is what we are about. We plant the seeds that one day will grow. We water seeds already planted, knowing that they hold future promise. We lay foundations that will need further development. We provide yeast that produces far beyond our capabilities. We cannot do everything, and there is a sense of liberation in realizing that. This enables us to do something, and to do it very well. It may be incomplete, but it is a beginning, a step along the way, an opportunity for the Lord's grace to enter and do the rest. We may never see the end results, but that is the difference between the master builder and the worker. We are workers, not the master builders, ministers, not messiahs. We are prophets of a future, not our own.
Ministers, not messiahs.
Yeah.
Oh man, that is so powerful. Thank you so much to both of you for sharing that. I feel like it's such a relevant and encouraging word for so many. Maybe 2 weeks ago, we had a summit of all of our leaders at the Grace Churches, and we had Ruth Haley Barton come out, and she spoke a little bit to some of the discontentment that we can often feel in ministry and compared it to Moses and his relationship with God, where he didn't actually reach the promised land, and how to maybe many in this culture that we have now that's instant gratification, 2-day shipping, immediate internet, that would be actually deeply frustrating. But she reframed, she was like, I deeply believe that Moses was able to pass that baton off because he knew at the end of the day he was deeply satisfied with his relationship to God, and his satisfaction ultimately in that relationship, in that communal with him, and in an eternity with God. And so I really appreciate you guys bringing that up because I've often heard that as a platitude and not as a hopeful direction. And I think you set up for our listeners a really beautiful way of having and holding to perspective. I think of myself as a brown woman that has a bank account and has savings and retirement. And that's something that my grandmother never would have had. And so just all of the different steps that lead us towards healing and restoration that one generation may not see, but that another gets to reap the fruits of. That's so deeply encouraging and hopeful. So that was a prayer written by a Catholic priest titled Prophets of a Future Not Our Own. Troy put that link in the chat, and we're also going to put the link to the interview with Chuck and Troy in the chat as well. And that being said, I would love in the comments just to hear any thoughts on that prayer, or how you're feeling after hearing that. Prophets of a Future Not Our Own. What are you thinking and or feeling? I see a lot of heads nodding. Yeah. The prayer helps me exhale. It isn't all on me or us. Powerful to forecast what is needed in Jesus' name. Very good reminder to not get stuck on what we see happening today. Love that. I love that so much. Well, hey, everyone, thank you for leaning in and sharing. I am so encouraged by those of you who are here. I'm so grateful that the gathering exists as this space for us to have a sort of watering hole of belonging. And as the gathering team kind of gathered together, even to plan what could this space look like at its best, and at its most full, we landed on highlighting different elements covered in the Beatitudes over Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. So if you were with us last month, we got to just do some Lectio Divina over the whole passage and ask God, hey, where are you in this moment? What are you saying to me as it relates to this passage? What we're going to be doing over the next year, though, is highlighting different verses. And whether that's through prayer or through a great speaker, we're going to get to hear different elements of that. And so tonight, we're going to get to hear from our guest speaker, Josh Clemons of OneRace, based in Atlanta, as he shares a little bit out of verse 3, which is, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." But Josh is also the author of No Own Change, Journeying Towards God's Heart for Reconciliation. He's both the founding team member of OneRace and the executive director currently. But he's built this reputation as a lover of God, a people builder, a reconciler of cultures, and is both an author, a professor, and just a dear friend of mine. He's led this wonderful racial reconciliation movement down here in the South. So I am so stoked to get to hear from him. And that being said, I did show you a clip of an interview with Chuck and Troy, but my church also got to interview Josh and his colleague Dan. So if you follow that YouTube link, you can see another interview with Josh and get some of his wisdom even further. But I'm really excited for you all to get to hear and learn from him today. So Josh, take it away.
Jasmine, I'm going to pay you really good after this. Like, legit. That was a kind intro. I was like, who is she talking about? And I should also say that photo of me and my family, as beautiful as it is, some kind of way we've multiplied since then. We have a third boy. All right. So now we have a 5-year gap between our middle child and our, all the hearts, between our middle child and our youngest child at this point. So I've got an 8-year-old, I've got a 6-year-old, and I've got a 1-year-old. And it's terrorism at my house presently. And the assaults are real. But it's a real joy. It's a real joy. So thank you so much, Jasmine, for having me. Troy and Chuck are dear friends. Like I aspire to be as cool as Troy and Chuck at some point in my life. And so thank you guys for welcoming me here. I want to kick this off in a bit of a strange place. I don't have a lot of time, so we're going to get right to it. If I can get that slide of the art exhibit, please. This art exhibit, anytime I talk about the Beatitudes, always comes to mind, right? What do you see there? Take a moment. Look at the image. Hands. An interesting image. Looks like a target practice, but what? What is it all sitting on? Is some kind of scrap wood, beer cans. I see cigarette boxes. I see holes in these cans. Let me ask you this question. I'd like for you to respond in the chat. You ready? If you walked into a room and you saw this, what would be your immediate reaction? You got 45 seconds. Let's go. Coke versus Pepsi. Hey, I like a little humor. Turn around and run. Oh, I like that one too. Trash. Yes. You know, I'm a little bit of a germaphobe. Not gonna hold y'all. Not my favorite situation for sure. Interesting trash. Interesting. Someone is giving away the secrets here, so they have seen this before. So I'm not even going to comment on it. I live in Waco, Kentucky, right at home. A lot of mixed reviews. Well, I think the artist who put this exhibit together, and they do a lot of these exhibits like this, knew that we would have that visceral response. We would see the beer cans, we would see the Pepsi bottles, we'd see the competition between Coke and Pepsi, we'd see the cigarette. You'd have all the things. But if we take just a moment, right? If we were in this art exhibit, after about 60 seconds, they would turn on the light. Let's go to the next slide. And when you turn on the light, you suddenly see the intentionality of all of us. You suddenly see that there was a purpose, there was a meaning behind every bit of this. The holes, the placement of the cans. It's less about what's in front of you and more about the inherent value here. Right? Now, I'm not this kind of guy. I don't call this stuff art, but this is definitely art. It isn't what I would think of initially. And I'm certain that this is worth bukus and bukus of millions and billions and zillions and gazillions of dollars, right? This is kind of like the Beatitudes. It kind of drives right at it in that there is a great reversal on the rise. Those whom we might deem as unimportant are dearly important to Jesus and in this kingdom. Those who are on the margins are those who are very, very important to Jesus. Those who have been disregarded, discarded, rejected are dearly important to Jesus. We often look at the cans. We see the cigarette butts. We see the holes. We see the rubbish. We see the germs. But Jesus sees something inherent. He sees something beyond what meets the eye, much like this. And so when we start reading the Beatitudes, it's important that we don't take it at surface value. It's important that we dig in a little further and consider who Jesus might be talking to, because that context helps us to see what he's saying a little bit clearer. And I wish I had time to dig into verses 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We ain't got time for that. We're going to hone right in on 3, because I think that this level sets the rest of the Beatitudes. We won't have time for that one. Let's just keep going. There we go. And he opened his mouth and taught them, saying, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. I'll never forget growing up, hearing this text preached as some means of being anti-prosperity. That in order to be a part of God's kingdom, you had to be poor, right? Uh, how many times have we heard this or heard this text preached in that it's some kind of a instruction for living? Well, I'm not quite sure. How do I practice poorness? How do I practice poverty of spirit? How do I do this? And I think that we have to dial it back just a bit and know that Jesus' invitation here is not to a particular practice, but to an ethical position, an ethical lens through which we are to view the world. Let's not forget who he was talking to. He is definitely talking to the outcasts. He's not talking to the social elites. He's not talking to those who have power to wield. He's talking to those that might be the immigrants of our moment. He's talking to those who might be the refugees of our moment. He's talking to those who might be those DEI hires. He's talking to those who society might look upon with disdain. This is of critical importance as we read this text, because if we don't read this text knowing that this is who he is speaking to, we will arrive at the wrong conclusion. In my estimation, the context of this passage is as important as what's on the paper, because if we don't get the context right, we won't arrive at the right destination. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. So Josh, you're saying all of these things, you're waxing eloquently here, but what do you mean by this? What does the text actually mean? Well, I want to take my cue from a priest as well today. If you want to go ahead and go to that next slide. Who are the poor in spirit, and how should we read this text? According to scholar Michael Joseph Brown, he offers a succinct definition. Those for whom the system does not work. He would say that in the text, given the context, that those who are poor in spirit, he would say, are those for whom the system of this world does not work. Let's stop here for a second. Who are we talking about? The disregarded, the disinherited, the outcast, the powerless in society? Think about your present moment in history. When you're powerless in America, well, heck, you might not have access to the best schools. You might not have access to the resources necessary to buy eggs in this moment, because I don't know if y'all have seen it, but them eggs are expensive right now. Had me second guessing myself, like $8, right? Those for whom the system of this world does not work. And if you don't have power, if you don't have money, if you don't have social standing, if you can't walk right into the White House or into the Oval Office, if you can't influence policy in some way, or don't even have the wherewithal that you can, this is who Jesus is talking about here. He's talking about those who are disregarded, those who are disenfranchised from power, which helps us to understand the rest of the passage here, right? As you start to consider. But I don't want to spend my time in that. I want to read a little bit more of what Michael Joseph would say about this particular text. You ready? You can leave it there. He would say, those for whom the system of this world does not work is who the poor in spirit are. By contrast, being rich meant having the power to get or to take whatever you wanted. Poor in spirit points to those who are economically vulnerable, but also those who are socially, spiritually, emotionally, and mentally oppressed. This particular crowd would be absolutely full of those people who identified with this reality. Men who were abused by the Roman rule. women who were subjugated under the patriarchal culture, those cast out from community because of their illness or their social status, those burdened under an unjust tax system. The people listening to Jesus here were not people who had social or economic leverage. There are so many ways to be poor in spirit in this world. Perhaps you even see yourself in this text. Profound. Because I see myself in this text. But I don't just see myself in this text, I see children in this text. I see those who don't have access to great education in this text. I see those who are seeking asylum. I see those who are seeking a better life for their families. I see those who, like my wife, are trying to find, who is a Black woman, trying to find her next step in corporate America. Those for whom the system of this world does not work. The kingdom of heaven is for them. It's interesting here that Jesus doesn't center the powerful. He centers those and aligns himself with the vulnerable. Doesn't this run cross to everything that we are taught in society? It runs cross to everything that we perceive in the world. Because to have power, to have wealth, to have upward mobility is to have access or to be insulated from suffering. I think about my family, and we're presently participating in what we would call a Target fast. Perhaps some of you guys have seen this. I'm actually producing a couple videos and statements and what have you around this because I think it's a great way for a lot of us, many of us, to get involved. I think everybody should be involved, not just Black folk, white folk too, Asian folk, Hispanic folk, all of us, galvanizing our power and interests together. I think this matters. Why? Because I live up in the suburbs outside of the city of Atlanta. In some ways, we are insulated from some of the nonsense that's going on in the world. But I want to be aligned with the most vulnerable. I want to be aligned with those who are suffering. I want to be in agreement with those who are wanting to defy the powerful systems of the day. Because if God's blessing is with those people are the people I want to be with. If the kingdom is for them, those are the people I want to serve. And so this Target fast, in response to all of the DEI cutting measures at Target, if you're not familiar, 2020 Target's headquarters is in Minneapolis. And because of the racial trauma, the racial unrest that happened there related to the death of George Floyd and subsequently Philando Castile, Target took a very aggressive stance and said that they're going to invest so many billions of dollars into the Black community and that they are going to platform and give voice to those who are on the margin, specifically Black folk, right? And over the last few weeks, with the coming and the dawning of a new presidential administration, Target has decided to relinquish, to disavow that commitment, right? But Josh, why Target? Well, because we can't be everywhere, right? You can't take on everything, but we can take on something. I'm reminded of the Montgomery bus boycott. It wasn't that everyone in Montgomery was to disavow all white institutions or all oppressive institutions. No, it was a very targeted, precise, measured effort to get results. And so my family, we're in line. We're with it. I don't like what Target did. And while they're not the only actors, man, they're going to feel the pinch. They're going to feel the punch. Because I want to be aligned with those for whom the system of this world does not work. right? And also, let's never forget, I am also a Black man, so I represent some of that as well. And so, my closing question to you would be: in what ways can you align with those for whom the systems of this world doesn't work? In what ways can you stand in solidarity with those who are vulnerable? In what ways can we amplify the voices of women? In what way can we stand in solidarity with refugees, with the migrant, with the immigrant, with the sojourner? In what ways can we stand in solidarity with Black folk? Because these things matter. Theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And I want to end with this, if we'll go to that last slide. I know we can't read this in unison, but read this right out loud where you are, and I'm going to read it to you. Ready on three. 1, 2, 3. Blessed will I be when I realize my need for God, for mine is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed will I be when I am sensitive enough to see the discarded, disregarded, and disinherited among us, for the kingdom of heaven is ours. Thank you guys for your time. Thank you for giving audience to my sharing. Yeah, grateful for this time and you all having me here today.
Thanks a lot, Josh. Just I was thinking as you were sharing of all the times in the Gospels where we see Jesus living out this verse, bringing the kingdom of heaven to those for whom the system does not work, over and over and over again. So beautiful words, an important challenge, and thanks for flagging the Target Fast, which I believe emanated out of Atlanta as a way of expressing Lent. So thanks for that invitation. Just a couple of quick questions, and then I know we need to get to small groups. You did mention standing with, this is Women's History Month, and some folks were wondering, as you prepare and think and lead OneRace, I know you've been doing ministry for a long time. Are there some women, theologians, authors, speakers, examples, maybe one that you want to lift up that has had an influence on you and you would recommend for us to check out?
Now, Troy, you cannot ask me for just one.
I just
because
did.
because Black preachers, I want y'all to know, Black preachers were disobedient and defiant by nature, and so I've got 5. No, but I probably have more than one. Anytime that I'm asked this question, I immediately think of my wife. Right? Not conventional, hadn't written a book on these things, none of those things. But the lady teaches me more about God, about the gospel, about what it means to love than anyone I have ever met. It's just a truism. Secondarily, Brenda Salter McNeil, Dr. Brenda Salter McNeil, man, talk about a living legend. The lady has written some stuff and has done some stuff that I'm just enamored with. Even before I started this journey with OneRace, I was affected by her work. Love Dr. Brenda. And then finally, Emily P. Freeman, not a traditional scholar, but her book on spiritual direction, How to Walk into a Room, has been incredible as of late. It's one of my most recent reads. So I digress on that.
Well, I think I met your wife and you at the same time, and I think I may have met her first, which made me excited to meet you as well. So great choice there. And we met at a convening in Seattle led by Dr. Brenda Salter McNeil. So yeah, very good call. And Dr. Brenda was the very first guest we had at the very first gathering a year ago. So we need to get her back. So very good.
Dr. B, love her.
Great answer. And maybe someone can put a link in the chat of some of the many books she's written. Amazing stuff. Well, after we met, maybe about a year or so later, I got to go on a civil rights tour with OneRace, and I remember there were some issues with the buses, but we'll leave that behind.
Oh God.
It took us a while to get out of Atlanta, let's just put it that way. But once we finally made it to Alabama, we spent some time in Selma, and we walked from Brown Chapel, which is where the courageous Selma young people and leaders embarked from on March 7th, 1965. We did a walk. I think I did a little impromptu historical teaching right as we were about a half block from the Edmund Pettus Bridge, and then we walked over that bridge together. But I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you, Josh, on the yesterday was the 60th anniversary of Bloody Sunday. That is commemorated in the movie Selma and has been talked and written about so many times. I wonder, as you think about this moment, and even you're sharing today about the kingdom of God is for those whom the system does not work. Any reflection on Selma, the courage, the brutality, the violence, and the impact of their courage?
Yeah, I think it's a reminder that the fight isn't over. The fight isn't over. And while in this moment, it isn't billy clubs and horses and tear gas and the assault on black bodies and the like, and white bodies too, because there are white bodies there as well. Um, I think it's a reminder that we're gonna have to persevere, that we are going to have to resist. Uh, while in this moment, under this, and I'm just going to speak frankly, because we just are where we are, under this administration and the aggressive stances that are being taken against Black folk, against migrants, uh, against a number of different folks. We're going to have to resist on a few different levels. One, we're going to have to resist the pool of bitterness and darkness in our soul, right? The second thing is that we're going to have to resist in that we fight through our various channels, advocating for the rights of people, advocating for the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, advocating for the restoration of many of these rights that have been gutted over the last 10 or 15 years. Yeah, it's a reminder that we still, while we've made progress, we still have a ways to go.
Yeah, I love how you started with resisting the temptation of uh, just getting angry, lashing out. And what does it mean for us to stay committed and stay relentless in the struggle for justice? And we like to say at Undivided, we want to have open hands. We want to lock arms with those who are most vulnerable. We want to have hopeful hearts, and we want to be ready to take bold steps. And I think this moment calls for those postures. I'm going to turn it first. Thank you, Josh. I know you'll be hanging around for a little bit for the after party, but I want to turn it over to Jasmine, who will send us out for some small group discussions.
Yeah, that was awesome. Such a great Q&A. Also, Josh, such a great discussion. I'm seeing the chat just light up with some thoughts, and people are probably already wondering or considering, or maybe are my folks who are internal processors are just soaking it all in. That being said, we are going to jump into our small group space where maybe we could step into some of those discussions a little deeper. But if you have any questions for Josh, of course, stick around for the after party with Josh and our staff. But an important part of why we gather is for spaces of connection. So we're going to move into some breakout rooms for discussion. Each of your rooms is going to have a small group leader who will be guiding the group. But because of our small group sizes, everyone might not have a chance to share. You'll have 15 minutes total, and we'll pull you back. There should be a little timer in your breakout. But your small group leaders are there to help keep the conversation moving. And at the end of the gathering, we're going to have a chance to continue the conversation in the after party if you don't have time to share. I would, though, encourage all of you to turn on your cameras if you are able in your small group, as just one of our best practices for showing up in this, specifically in the Zoom small group space. We've had some folks maybe either not be who they say they are, or not honor this space super well. And so by turning your camera on, at least for our small group time, it's a way of honoring those who have showed up in this space. So we'll be back at 7:53, and the questions are in the chat, but your small group leaders have them as well.
All right. Welcome back, everyone. If you want to share briefly in the chat, how was your breakout? Maybe a feeling word you're bringing out of the breakout. Conversation and prayer time would be great. Just want to share a couple things with you. One is we sometimes do a big ask. And today we have something that foreshadows a bit of where we're going at Undivided. We were at a gathering, Chuck Mingo, our founder, and I, just over a month ago in San Francisco, and we were asked to think about what's the big cultural shift that we dream about that Undivided could be a part of. And we were told to dream big and really pray and wrestle and not be limited. And Chuck and I both really centered around this idea. And some of you may have heard Dr. King talk about this. Let's go ahead and pull that for a second, if we could, the slide. Dr. King and others often said that 11 a.m. on Sunday morning is the most segregated hour in the United States. That was true in the 1920s, 1930s, 1940s, 1950s, 1960s. And unfortunately, that continues to be true today. In fact, we talked about this with our staff a few weeks ago, and one of our staff members, Elizabeth Cronlund, said, well, it's not just the most segregated hour, it's the most divided hour. It's divided by gender, by race, it's divided by generation. It's divided between Jesus followers and non-Jesus followers. It's divided by ethnicity. It's divided by political persuasion. It is the most divided hour, 11 a.m. on Sunday, as a stand-in for the church. And we don't believe it has to be that way. There is this dream that the Apostle John sees in Revelation 7:9 of people from every tribe, tongue, and language coming before the throne and worshiping the Lamb, Jesus Christ. It's a picture of a multi-ethnic, multiracial kingdom of God. That's where we're headed. Chuck Mingo likes to say that's in our inevitable future in heaven. I don't know of a time in human history that there has been a better opportunity for the church to experience and live into that Revelation 7:9 dream than what we have before us in this next decade or two. We have the most multiracial, multi-ethnic country in the history of the world. And that country can show up in our church, in a country that's becoming more and more divided by the moment. We have a dream that 11 a.m. on Sunday morning will be the most undivided hour in this country. 11 a.m. on Sunday morning, the most undivided hour in this nation. And so we want to invite you, and you put the slide up now, Shelley. We want to invite you to get on your phone, and you can go into your calendar and actually do a daily event reminder to pray that 11 a.m. on Sunday, and I'm doing it right now, becomes the most undivided hour in the USA. And you can set it to repeat. I'm going to set it for 11 a.m. tomorrow, a.m., repeat daily, and I'm going to add it. And from now on, I'm going to have a reminder on my phone. I'm going to be praying with that. We're going to talk about this next month. I believe it's on April the 13th will be our next gathering. We're going to celebrate the 10th anniversary of the Undivided Movement, when Chuck Mingo first gave his visionary teaching on a Sunday at Crossroads Church. And we're going to talk about an exciting future we believe God has for us at Undivided to meet the moment. and ways we can grow in the coming weeks, months, and years. So you won't want to miss joining us for the next gathering. It's going to be April 13th, 7 p.m. Eastern. Let me turn it over to Jasmine to close us in prayer.
We are so grateful for each of you who joined us tonight. And I hope that this time, this hour has been a blessing for you. So I'm going to close us in prayer, but don't forget to hang around for the after party with Josh and our team afterwards. So if you are able, I would invite you to just put your feet flat on the ground, release some tension in your shoulders, open up your hands as you are able in a posture of receiving as I pray this over you. Jesus, we love you. May we be people who love you more deeply now at the end of this call than we did when we hopped on. May we be folks who believe that 11 a.m. on Sundays could be the most undivided time in the United States, starting here in this Zoom call through our obedience to practicing your ways and loving enemy as our friend and as ourself. Would we be folks who believe that there is a great revival on the rise? Lord, in the places where we may feel tempted to jump into discouragement or feel dismayed by the division and the discouragement of this cultural moment we are in, would we take solace in all of the cultural moments throughout Scripture that provide us encouragement that you have been here for us before? And whether our call is to be a Moses that says we love you and we don't have to reach that promised land, or we are a Joshua that gets to, through the faithfulness of others, step into this moment in this unique time of peacemaking. Irregardless of where we are in this cultural moment, God, we say we love you. We are grateful for you. We are grateful for your healing touch over our hearts, our families, and our communities. And it is out of that abundance of your love that we seek to be peacemakers, be people who, in the midst of sorrow, love you deeper and invite others to love and know you deeper as well. Amen.